Welcome to another Garage Time with Goody. Today, we're going to be fixing and wrenching another project. What are we going to be doing? Stay tuned and you'll find out. What we're going to be working on today is a 2006 Dodge Dakota 4.7 liter engine, four-wheel drive. The symptoms that we're dealing with in this truck is when I use the brakes, sometimes it will pull to the right. It'll pull to the passenger side just a little bit. And another thing that it does is I can smell what they call brake dust. You can smell kind of like metal kind of burning and grinding away, and that's what you call burning brake dust, and that will eat at your brake shoes a lot faster than normal. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to show you what is wrong with this truck. It is, in fact, a brake caliper. In this particular truck here, it has dual brake pistons in the front, and one of those pistons has a problem. Now, one of the things you can do when you first park, if you smell brake dust or you smell burning smell, you just go up to, you get water and you spray the rotor, and if it's not hot, then it's okay. So this side was okay, but when I came out here earlier and I sprayed this side, there was some steam coming back off of the rotor and the brake. Now, you definitely don't want to touch it when it's hot like that. Another way you can tell that the brake pad is breaking down and that the brake piston might be sticking is the color of the rims. See, look right here. Look right there. See how this just moves around? Well, that right there is the brake pad burning away. You can see here that the rim is not like that. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to jack this truck up with a jack. I'm gonna put some jack stands under there for safety. And then we're gonna take this tire off and we're gonna go get a caliper and we're gonna change it out. That way it won't be pulling to one side. That rotor will not be heating up anymore, because if it's not changed, it could cause you to actually wreck, or for the brakes to go out. It could cause a lot of problems and we don't want that. So let's just change it out. Now make sure when you put the jack under there, do not put the jack under an oil pan or transmission pan. That'd be bad. Make sure you know where the jack is going on a solid part of the frame and jack the truck up. I'd also like to note that I have an impact gun, so I do not have to take the lug nuts off first of the tire. I can take those off once it is jacked up. If you do not have an impact gun, then before you jack the truck up, you will want to remove the lug nuts and then jack the truck up. I'm going to jack it up about 3 inches off the ground. The next part, I'm going to be using these jack stands. Now, these jack stands, what they do, in case that jack fails and falls, then these jack stands are going to hold up the truck and not let it fall on you. So it's a safety to protect your life. And what more important is your life, right? You're going to want to take these off counterclockwise, which is to the left. Like if a clock is going this way, you'll want it to go the opposite way. And I'm going to put the lug nuts there. All the lug nuts are off. You may need to give the tire a kick, a slight kick, for it to come off. And I'm just going to roll the tire out of the way. And then, as you can see, if you want to see these internal parts real quick, you can see that this is the rotor. This metal piece right here, all around through here is the rotor. This right here is the caliper. This right here, this is the retainer bracket. And your brake pads are right here on each side of the caliper. So right here, I'm going to have to take this old part off because I need this in a hurry, and I'm going to an automotive store where they sell auto parts, and they usually want your old part for a cord charge. So in this case, I have another ride to the auto parts store, and instead of them charging me a cord charge, which would be $50, I went ahead and called and seen if they just want the caliper, which is this part, or if they need the retention bracket too. They said they need the whole bracket with the caliper. And I'm going to go ahead and take this off so they won't charge me that $50 cord charge. So the first thing I'm going to do is you go behind here, and I'm going to start taking these bolts here, 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 and up here off. These are going to be two 12 millimeters. And you want to go, if you're on the passenger side, you want to push upward. You want to push up because that will push the bolt counterclockwise. And I'm going to loosen this one up here. So I've got them both broke loose, and I can actually move these slider pins, that's what these are, with my fingers now. And I'm just going to go ahead and take them out by hand, and here they are. Can you see those? All right, there they are. I'm setting these on the ground, and if this is stuck really bad, this is the actual caliper, you can take a pry bar and pry it back, which is what I'm going to do. This is a pry bar right here. It has this kind of flat surface. It's going to fit down in between here. And then I'm just going to push out. And then I'm just going to pull. This is a little bit harder here. This brake piston is kind of stuck, so it's harder for this to come off of here. These are called brake pistons, and this has dual brake pistons, meaning there's two of them. And this one right here is the one that's been catching and going bad and causing the brakes to engage prematurely. Now we're taking this off for the cord charge because they actually rebuild these. And if you look right here, you see this dust. I don't know if you can see that dust or not, but watch it flake away just like that. We're going to have to take these brakes off, and you can see see that? That is brake dust where the brakes have been engaging, because what happens is this piston will engage and push out on the brake, and it will then engage the brakes and keep it on, and then when you accelerate, it will be pushed up against the rotor here, and then it will be working against friction. So you'll have to give the vehicle more gas to go because the brakes are engaged, and if the other brake is not engaged it's going to pull to the side that the brake is on because it's trying to stop this side, if that makes any sense. So the thing to do is to completely change this caliper out, because not only will it wear out your brake pads quickly, it's also unsafe and can pull to one side and cause you to wreck. Okay, now here is the hydraulic brake lines on top of the caliper, and I'm going to go ahead and start loosening that up. And there will be some brake fluid coming out. And that's normal. That brake fluid will come out of this. And what you'll want to do, you'll want to set this hose up. I'm going to put this bolt, since it's disconnected now, I'm going to put this bolt back on here. And this is actually the caliper right here. And that's with the dual brake piston. Now this part right here is actually the bracket. After you get the caliper bolts off, they were 12 millimeters, by the way. It was here and here. You're going to have to get these two bolts off, and that takes the retainer off. These should be size 21 millimeter. Again, because the brake fluid is leaking, I'm going to buy some brake fluid. Here's what these bolts look like when they come out. I'm going to buy some brake fluid from the auto store. Now each automobile, each vehicle has its own kind of brake fluid. So you want to know what kind of brake fluid that your vehicle takes. For when you put this back together. And we're also going to have to bleed the brakes too, which I'll show you that when we get to it. But for now, this retainer comes off just like this. And this retainer kind of all goes together like this right here. What you want to keep before you take to your core charge is the retainer bracket bolts, these big bolts. But anyways, this is the retainer bracket, this is the caliper itself. We're going to go take this so that we don't have to pay a $50 core charge, and then we'll be back to put it together. Okay, this is the new caliper and retention bracket, and in this case it comes with all new bolts. You'll see right here is the top of it. Looks really nice. New paint finish, all new bolts. These are called the slider pin bolts. They're on there. It comes with a package for your brakes, these brake retainer clips, so that we're going to put the brakes on. So I'm going to get ready to install this. These brake pistons look much better. Another thing to note, that the bolt sizes on the new caliper may be different than on your old one. The other one was a 12. This is a 13 millimeter on the slider bolts, slider pin. gonna go ahead and take these off. I'm gonna go ahead and break the connection of the bolt. What I'm doing here, this has an outer bolt and an inner bolt. Well, when I turn this outer bolt here, see when I turn that, the inner bolt is moving. So I don't want that to move so I can stop it. So I'm going to use a box wrench. This is a 17 millimeter. This socket is a 13, and I'm going to use it to break loose that slider pin bolt. This one will come right off, and I'm going to put that there. Now this should separate from the retainer just like that. That is the new retainer. Now these are the slider pins themselves, and these slider pins have just been greased, and you'll want them to be able to move back and forth like this. See how that moves back and forth? That lets the caliper move back and forth. Now, over time, when people change your brake pads, you should put a little bit of grease on your slider pins here. See on these pins? These slider pins need that grease to move back and forth. If not, these slider pins stop moving, and then when they do, then that can also lock up your brakes. So when you're doing this job, you'll want to make sure that these slider pins are freely moving back and forth. And also, you may want to get a little bit of grease when you're changing your brake pads and re-grease these slider pins. What I've done here is, as the brake fluid is leaking, I have a clean container that the brake fluid is leaking into. So I'm going to save that brake fluid. Okay, on the top of the caliper, you're going to notice this. Now this is very important, and this is something that you want to pay close attention to. This bolt here, some people call it the brake hose bolt, and some people call it the banjo screw. You can call it whatever you want, but this screws out, and you will see there's two copper washers underneath of it. Now what you want to do is you definitely want to leave one copper washer on the bottom. This is very important that you leave that copper washer there, because this copper washer, when it tightens and you torque this down, it bends to the crevice in the surface of this caliper, and it forms a seal, and it prevents that hydraulic brake fluid from leaking. So do not just put one washer on. Make sure you get that bottom washer. All right, now the next thing I'm going to do, see, this is the brake line connector, and what I'm doing is I'm taking a flathead screwdriver, and I'm getting these old copper washers off. And you can see there's one on each side. Just like I said, you can see how this pitted and formed a seal to the old caliper. And that's why it's so important to have both of those. You can clean this with brake cleaner. You don't have to, but it's a good idea. And that way you'll get a much smoother surface. I want to get this a little bit cleaner. You want to be careful, because if yours is really rusty, it could just break off. This one isn't that rusty. I'm just wanting to clean the surface a little bit. Okay, what you want to do is make sure that this copper washer is on the bottom. Then put the bleeder or the banjo screw in, and by looking at the other side, you can see that this is pointed upwards. The connector, this little block right here, this metal block, make sure that you have also the top copper washer on, and then you start tightening this bolt down. This is a 14mm bolt now. And I will put the torque specs in the video description. And you'll tighten this down. Okay, so once you get this back together and this is screwed down, you want to make sure that there is no leaks coming from underneath of the copper washer, from the line itself, or from the bolt on top of the copper washer. Now I'm going to put the caliper retention bracket back on. You'll see the slider pins are going to be facing the back, as well as these two bolt holes. I'm just going to put this in like this. This goes over the rotor. And the rotor, make sure it's pushed back. And I'm going to insert that first bolt and just get it started by hand. And I'm going to do the same with the other one that goes in the top right here. We reuse these two bolts. Switch the ratchet to clockwise and go ahead and start tightening this down. Should be able to see the bracket moving back accordingly until it gets flush with the wheel knuckle. Now I'm not going to tighten it down all the way yet until I get the top one equally tightened down. You'll see the bracket moving to become flush with the wheel knuckle up here too. Again, I will put the torque specs in the video description. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this bottom one. Okay. Now that's going to bring us to the brakes. Now, this is usually all you have to do when you're changing the brakes. You just remove this top caliper. You get to the retention bracket and the brakes, these little metal clippings that are going to hold the brakes in place. Now, the best way on this truck, it's different on each one, but the best way on this truck is to actually insert the metal tabs with the metal tab facing backward. Let's see if that's right. With the metal tab facing backward, and you just slide it on the tops. And then you'll push it back slightly. We're going to put the first metal piece on, the metal tab. Remember, with the tail facing backward and the flat piece facing toward the brake pad. We do that here, and we push it in. Two brake pistons are already reset. Put the caliper on, just like so. You take the slider pin bolts, then you get them started on the slider pins. And I'm just gonna get it finger tight. Socket 14. And I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that down. Now remember, on the inside, if this starts moving, you'll want to use a box wrench. It's a 17 millimeter to hold that bolt in place while this tightens it down. And that's what I'm doing here. You do the same for the top.
No angle for that one.
That one is tight. Let's make sure the bottom one is completely tight. There we go, that's tightened down. Next step is we're gonna go up to the top. We're gonna put some brake fluid in. We're gonna start bleeding the brakes. You take this little rubber cap up off of the bleeder screw. And this particular bleeder screw, I'm using a gear head wrench. This one will take a 7/16. Next step, you're gonna want brake fluid, because probably doing this job, some has leaked out. You're gonna want to get the right amount. Now, in this particular vehicle, this truck, we're gonna get .3. I'm gonna pour some in, goes right here. I'm gonna be careful. And I'm not gonna pour it all in because I wanna make sure it's not leaking. And if it's leaking, I can make adjustments. I just don't wanna have to go buy another bottle of brake fluid. I wanna look at the banjo screw and see if there's any leaking brake fluid. There does not appear to be any leaking brake fluid, and that's a good sign. I'm gonna go ahead and put the rest of the brake fluid in, and then we can bleed the brakes. Okay, you don't have to have a partner. In fact, check this link out up here if you want to do this by yourself, but I highly suggest you have a partner when doing this. This right here is the bleeder screw, and on this, it is 7/16. I'm going to loosen it up. I'm going to have my partner press the brakes down 5 times, then I'm going to loosen the bleeder screw, and when I loosen the screw, air that's trapped inside the brake lines should come out, and you may see a little bit of brake fluid shoot out too. You need to keep doing this procedure, and after you see the air come out and the brake fluid come out a little bit, you're going to want to retighten the screw and then have your partner pump the brakes about 5 times again and then release the screw. You repeat this procedure until the brake paddle starts to harden inside. Okay, go ahead and pump it 5 times. Yeah, let off, pump, let off, pump, let off. And as the person keeps holding it, you heard the air come out, right? Then you tighten it back up, and that gets some of the air out. Then pump it 5 more times, let off, and just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you keep holding it, and then I'm gonna loosen it up, and as you can see, brake fluid started to come out this time. So now when my partner lets off the brake and he starts trying to pump it, he should start to feel a little bit of a brake paddle. He should start to feel it firm up. Yep, can you feel the brake at all? Is it kind of firm? How firm is it? Okay, so this is the last time. You can see there was nothing but brake fluid coming out. So we're going to tighten this down. And that's exactly how you bleed the brakes. We'll put this rubber hat back on the bleeder valve. Just like that. Then that is how you change the caliper retention bracket. Put the brakes back on. We're ready to put the tire back on. So now it's time to put the tire back on. For those of you that have a lug wrench, I'm gonna go ahead and use that way. For me, I'm gonna be using a impact gun. You want a 22 millimeter socket to put the lug nuts on. Now, so I'm I'm gonna go ahead and start putting these on by hand. I'm gonna start tightening these up diagonally each way, and that way this will go on flush to the rotor. I'm just gonna go around and check each one of these and make sure they're tight, and then we'll call it on. Okay, tires on. Now I'm going to get our tools, truck down. Before I sign off of here, if you're wondering if you need to bleed the brakes with the truck running, with the engine running or off, you do it with the engine turned off. Other than that, that's how you do it. I'm ready to other than that, I'm ready to take it around the block and test out my work. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to ask. I have an Instagram up in my channel banner. Just get a hold of me that way. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Hopefully this video will help somebody out there. That's why I do these for, guys. And until next time, to another Garage Time with Goody, take care of yourselves and each other.